It's been 5 years since that day, and life hasn't got much better for me. The money didn't get me as far as I hoped. Eventually, I wound up robbing some low-level guy at a rundown truck stop in the middle of nowhere. As it turns out, the owner of the truck stop, Gordo, uses the motel attached to the lot to run prostitutes and dope. The guy I robbed was one of his, and, well, he didn't take that too kindly. When they caught me, Gordo had 2 of his goons beat the shit out of me before they set me down at a table with the guy I robbed. After a few minutes, he walked in, looking the 2 of us over. He shook his head, then motioned to one of his men and said, "Give it to me at 1 and 1, then leave." The guy smirked, then stooped down and pulled a revolver from his ankle holster. He unloaded it, then handed Gordo the gun and 1 bullet before walking out, followed by the others. Once the door closed, Gordo took a seat and turned his attention to the guy I'd robbed. Sammy. How many times have I told you? Stop fucking up. Don't answer that. The point is, I keep telling you the same thing, yet here we are. To me, that says you don't respect me. He paused to slip a bullet into the chamber, then shifted his attention towards me. And then there's you. ¿Cómo te llamas? What's your name? Trying not to focus on the gun in his hand, I looked at him in the eye and told him my name. He nodded, thinking of a response, and then turned and cracked me across the head with a pistol. "Okay, Vic. It's do or die time." Sammy finally spoke up. "Gordo, come on, man. It wasn't mine." Gordo cut him off by aiming the pistol at him and pulling the trigger. Click. Empty chamber. Sammy didn't say another word. Gordo turned the gun back to me and sat back. "You ready?" I didn't respond. He pulled the trigger in for a second time. Click. I nearly shit myself. He laughed at the look on my face, then got up from his seat and stepped over to stand behind me. "Okay, Vic. Here's the deal. Sammy here, as you might have heard, is a bit of a problem. I hate problems." He paused to wipe the prints off the gun, and then set it in front of me. "I pulled the trigger twice. That means there's 3 chances for you to live through this before you go brain and try and shoot me. Just remember, the guys outside that door will kill you. Now pick it up and shoot him." Staring at the revolver in front of me, I hesitated. My entire body went cold, and I could feel the beads of sweat trickling down the back of my neck. I couldn't do it. I couldn't reach for the pistol. Gordo got impatient and pulled a gun of his own, then pressed the barrel to my head. He didn't have to say a word. I understood exactly what the alternative was. I thought maybe if I did it quick, it wouldn't be that bad. I was wrong. In one motion, I picked it up, brought it to eye level, and fired. There was an explosion of light, and the sound of Sammy's head snapped back, and his brain splattered against the wall behind him. In that split second between life and death, I saw his eyes. Something about them burned that image into my brain. Gordo laughed and put the gun away. "Nice shot. Didn't think you had it in you." His men came back in and took the body away, then bagged up the gun before cleaning up. Lighting a cigar, Gordo stepped to the door, then tapped the side of his head like he just remembered something. "Oh yeah. You work for me now. See you mañana." As the door slammed shut, I looked around the shitty little motel room. The matted green carpet and the smoke-stained walls reminded me of the old hideout from home. The smell of ammonia and pine saw made it hard to breathe, but it was better than gunpowder and blood. I guess the reality of what happened finally hit, and my stomach lurched, forcing me to make a run for the toilet. Once I pulled myself together, my first thought was my backpack. I stashed it near the dumpsters before they caught me. There isn't much in it, but I wasn't leaving without it. Making my way to the door, I tossed it open and was greeted by a mountain of a man staring me down. "Where are you going?" he asked gruffly, still glaring at me. Shaking my head, I told him nowhere, and he smirked. Sounds about right. He chuckled before shoving me back and closing the door. Accepting the fact that I was out of options for the moment, I stretched out on the bed and nodded off. The next thing I know, it's morning, and I'm being startled awake by two people barging into the room. I sit up to see a cute chick with a buzz cut holding a Polaroid camera, and the gorilla that had been guarding the door. Get up so we can get this over with, she blurted out. Get what over with? Who are you? I asked, stretching before getting up. Giving me an agitated sigh, she responded. Quickly bringing up the camera, she snapped a picture of me and then told me to follow them. As we strode through the complex, I tried striking up a conversation with Sid. She pretty much ignored me till we got to the unmarked unit in the back of the building. I went inside to find 6 monitors set up on a desk in the corner of the room. The rest of it was typical motel standard stuff. The next few days drifted by, and I was eventually able to get my bag. In it were the last 2 things that reminded me of home, the notebook and the last remaining vial of that brown liquid. Honestly, don't know why I kept them. Every time I looked at the vial, I remembered that day. In a way, it was all I had of my old life. One morning, Sid arrived for her shift, and I went to the truck stop to grab a bite to eat. One good thing about being there was the kitchen. The cook, an older guy named Dale, made some of the best burgers I'd ever had, and I was starving. I bellied up to the bar and ordered a bacon cheeseburger with grilled jalapenos. When my order was up, he brought it over and slid it to me. Wiping his hands on his apron, Dale gave me a concerned look. I know it's none of my business, but what are you doing working for Gordo? Taking a bite of my food, I nodded and held up the burger. I don't know how you do it, but these things are amazing. Swallowing my first mouthful, I shrugged and got to his question. I don't have much of a choice. It ain't all bad, though. These burgers make up for it. Casually glancing around to make sure nobody was listening, Dale gave me some advice. Yeah, if I were you, I'd find a way out of here. This place is bad news. The sound of chimes from the front door caused him to quickly toss on a fake smile and change the subject as he greeted a trucker walking in. He never came back to the conversation. For some reason, it was a busy morning. I finished my food and left. When I got outside, the air felt good. A warm breeze drifted through, carrying the smell of cigarette smoke. Standing a few feet away from me, near the ice machine, a couple was strolling through with their phones, discussing heading their own directions. They were both smoking and seemed nervous. I tried to walk off before one of them noticed me, but as I turned to leave, I heard the woman call out, "Hey, excuse me, but could you help us?" When I turned to face them, the guy with her instantly gave me a look as if he recognized me. As I got closer, I could see him trying to pick my name out of his brain, and the moment I stopped, his expression changed. Holy shit! Victor? Now the woman was giving me that same shocked expression. Oh my God, she gasped, going wide-eyed in recognition. Unfortunately, I knew who they were. Adam Gentry and Tabitha Lockhart. They were from back home. The two of them looked at me in complete disbelief before Adam finally spoke up. Jesus! Everyone thinks you're dead. After that whole thing with Glenn, people just assumed he'd killed you too. Seeing them again felt strange. Killed me too. What are you talking about? I asked, trying to ignore the way they was looking at me. Still staring, Tabitha jumped into the conversation. Yeah, he killed his parents, Ben Taylor and Sheriff Grant, before one of the deputies shot him. Since no one could find you, everyone thought he buried your body somewhere in the woods. Glenn's like a local legend now, especially since his body disappeared from the morgue. I cut her off. He didn't kill Ben. Ben was in jail when that happened. That's all bullshit. Adam's eyes got big and he blurted out, "Nope. Hate to break it to you, but they found Ben's body buried behind that house you guys used to hang out in. The police say Glenn got smoked out on meth and just went apeshit. As far as missing from the morgue thing, That's true too. No one knows who took him, but they buried an empty coffin. The conversation had dragged on for a while, and I wound up giving them directions back to the main highway. They asked me to go with them several times and even took a picture with me so they could prove they'd actually seen me. When they finally went on their way, I went back to my room where Sid was watching the monitors. She was thumbing around through the tablet from my backpack when I walked in. The vial was sitting on the desk in front of her. She didn't try to hide the fact that she'd been going through my things. Instead, she turned, waving the tablet in the air, and asked, "What is this?" I paused, trying not to overreact. After all, it was just a tablet, but the idea of her going through my shit was irritating. "Not yours is what it is. Aren't you supposed to be watching the camera?" She smirked and then picked up the vial. "I suppose you won't tell me what this is either." Without giving her an answer, I calmly walked over and gathered my things. "Nope," I replied, before putting them away and stretching out on the bed. Sid laughed and went back to doing her job while I lay there thinking about Adam and Tabby. It'd been a strange morning without seeing them and hearing about home. I was starting to think about hitting the road. Before I knew it, I was drifting into a dream. In it, I was standing on the front porch of my old house staring out at the street. All the houses were falling apart. The lawns were overgrown and the street was a mass of crumbling concrete lined with rusted out vehicles. Rain started to fall, and as did the sound of it tapping against the roof became a dull, thudding sound that slowly caused me to wake up. When I opened my eyes, the sound was still there. For a second I thought I was imagining it until I glanced over to see Sid wasn't watching the cameras. The sound was coming from the restroom. "You should have got me up if you needed a break. I would have covered for you." Waiting for a response, I sat there expecting to hear her voice, but she didn't say anything. Getting out of bed, stretching as I stood up, I noticed the closet door was open, and my backpack was gone. Fuck. I rushed to the restroom and threw the door open. If I was wrong, she could kick my ass later. I wasn't wrong. She was standing in the tub, banging her head against the shower wall. The vial was sitting on the sink, leaking some of the fluid into a soap dish. Shaking my head, I stepped over and picked it up, doing my best not to get any of it on me. Once I had it capped, I turned my attention to Sid. She had cut her forehead and was bleeding. I didn't know how she would react to seeing me, but I had to stop her. Getting closer, doing my best not to startle her. I called her name, but she didn't react. When I was close enough to touch her shoulder, I tried again. This time, she turned and kissed me in a way that would have been incredible if it weren't for the fact that she was covered in blood. And from what I knew, she liked girls. I guess something about that moment snapped her out of it, and she shoved me back instantly, getting angry. "What the fuck are you doing?" She paused, looking around the restroom before catching her reflection in the mirror and realizing that she was bleeding. I didn't know what to say. Grabbing a towel off the rack, she wiped her face and shook her head as it all came flooding back. "What is it? And where did it come from?" Stepping out of the tub, she tossed me a towel and walked out of the restroom. "So, spill, man. What is it? I need to know," she called out while taking her seat at the monitors. After I wiped my face with a different towel, I told her the whole story, leaving out the part with Tabby and Adam because I didn't want her to know. In any case, aside from Sid trying to buy the vial from me, got things back to their normal routine. 3 days later, on a quiet Tuesday night, there was a knock at the door. It instantly caught me off guard, mainly because I hadn't seen anyone walking through the complex, but also because no one who ever came in there knocked. I quickly switched to camera 5, which gave me a view of my door, and my jaw dropped. It was Tabitha. How did she get past me? There's no way I wouldn't have seen her coming. Without saying a word, I went over and opened up. She smiled. "Hey, Vic. We were passing through on the way back home, and I thought we'd try one last time to get you to come with us." Taking my attention off of her, I glanced around, being sure none of Gordo's people were watching. I don't think so, but you really shouldn't be here. How do you know where to find me? She smiled and shook her head. Well, okay then. It was good seeing you. You should really think about making the trip. I'm sure your parents would love to see you. Stepping close, she gave me a hug and then whispered in my ear, "You should have taken the offer." With that, she stepped back smiling, as if she hadn't said anything, and walked away. Of course, I watched for the obvious reasons, but I also wanted to make sure she was gone. As she turned the corner, she passed Sid, who was headed my way with a bottle of rum in one hand and a brown paper bag in the other. Giving Tabby the once-over, she turned her attention back to me while raising the bottle. "I brought party favors. Let's get fucked up." Shaking it off, I laughed. This was normal for Sid. She'd get something to sip on and be out cold after an hour. She slept in my room at least once a week. I figured she just didn't want to be alone in her own spot. As usual, after a few drinks, she was stretching out, snoring, and I was rubbing my eyes trying to focus on the grainy monitor for camera one. Feeling my buzz settling in, I stood up and went to the door for a breath of fresh air. One of the lot lizards was taking care of a customer next to the soda machine, which gave me an eyeful of something I didn't want to see, so I closed the door and went back to my seat. After a few minutes, I saw something odd on camera 4. There was an old guy strolling across the parking lot carrying what looked like a shotgun, and as he got close enough for me to verify that it was one, he brought it up and blasted the camera. "Shit!" Grabbing the phone and calling Pete, but there's no response. "Wake up!" I blurted out, causing Sid to jump out of her bed, nearly falling flat on her face. Before I could say anything, the sounds of shotgun blasts and screaming could be heard getting closer. That's my problem. There's some freak going Rambo in the complex and Pete's not picking up. We gotta get out of here before that guy gets there. 3 loud knocks from the front door cutting me off. Sid and I stood there frozen for a moment, till a man's voice called into us. Little pig, let me in." Trying to stay quiet, Sid mouthed, "Who the fuck is this guy?" I shrugged and started looking for a way out, even though I knew there was only one. The door. The guy outside banged again. Victor Wells. I know you're in there. Open up and make this easy on the both of us." Hearing him call me by my name instantly made my stomach hurt. I had no clue why he was after me. Sid yelled back, "You got the wrong room, asshole. There's no Victor in here." At this point, I'd already pulled up the camera to watch him. The old man stood there for a second, nodding his head. "Have it your way," he replied before turning around and quickly blasting the door hinges, then kicking it in. As the door came crashing down, a metallic canister about the size of a soda can clanked against the floor and rolled around a bit before exploding. The room was suddenly filled with blinding light, then everything went black. I woke to the sound of gunfire, along with a skull-splitting headache. It took a few seconds to clear my vision and realize my hands were cuffed. Still unconscious, Sid laid across from me. She didn't look hurt, but I was more concerned with figuring out what was happening. We were inside a van that had been converted to transport prisoners. After a few seconds, the gunfire stopped, and the van door closed. Noticing I was awake, the old man chuckled while cranking the engine. "Buckle up, kiddos. It's gonna be a bumpy ride." Who are you? What's this about?" Just saying those words made my head feel like it was 3 sizes too big. "Oh, come on now, Vic. Where's your sense of adventure? Besides, if I told you, it would ruin the surprise." I didn't bother asking again. In the back of my mind, I already knew where we were going. Home.